legislatively the Constitution that today have us agree to not disagree. And when we today on HR 2025, 2026 focus on the Constitution, then we focus on the communication that holds all that were built on earth. There are the acknowledgement to agree, not to disagree, in all that the communication have built and introduced in our years. And when it's a constitutional right for the legislative court of law to uphold their right with implementing fair processes on earth, and with ensuring that all processes that have been implemented, that acknowledges the office business in all acknowledgement, in all school color educational journey communications, under the subject communications that I studied in human resources. When the legislative responsibility that holds the right to do the process in acknowledgement to the household that the process are then therefore introduced to. On our Vogue Instagram, the educational apostrophe, the introduction. And when the household were introduced under the communication line, that are the computerized communications office, that are the office business acknowledgement, then the household have a right to have fair processes. And when the household were found in acknowledgement to its 100-year journey, biblical acknowledgement that are Genesis 1, the responsibility, Genesis 1 verse 7, that are the under the seas communications, in acknowledgement to all that were built on earth communications, in acknowledgement to the star communications that we were introduced to, an American television communication. Then the household that have the right to have a fair stay, have a right to then have fair processes. And when the governmental office implements new processes, like I educate the SARS payroll program, that are office program that are being updated regularly, when the communication changes that are in all acknowledgement to our journeys, communications that we have walked and that we have been introduced to, then governmental leaders have a right to change all houses' communications and update all houses' communications in acknowledgement to the fair processes that are legislative responsibility, that are a legislative acknowledgement, that are human rights for all of us, that forms part of our houses' communications. That were not only a house that we stay in, but that acknowledge and that access in American television our complete womb communications. And when it's your mama's womb, and it's your voice access, and it's in a music concert, just a voice board that the musicians control and manages. And then the sensitivity of the voice board are of utmost importance, I've learned all my years when I was in music, that the sensitivity that music board holds information that are kindly sensitive, high in acknowledgement. And when the music board are managed by the right music manager, music director, then the sensitivity are in acknowledgement to the legislative responsibility that we have being introduced to all that were built on earth in our journey. That for me, Ribea Elise, I'm 42 years old in my journey. For me, Queen Ribea Elise, I'm 42 years old in these 100-year journey communications. Then, therefore, the legislative responsibility are therefore the constitutional right that becomes an office, that becomes a legislative acknowledgement office, that acknowledges my evoke business being a legislative acknowledgement office, that acknowledges all that were built on earth, that acknowledges all the responsibilities that we have. And when we educate ourselves to be responsible in the communication line, then the communication line responds in all that the communication line have been introduced to. When we educate ourselves under the Constitution Act to be responsible and to be responsive and to respond in all that the Constitution had to respond to, in all that the Constitution have been introduced to in our Chinese communications, whether it's our household processes, whether it's our office employment communication line, whether it's a grocery store shopping line, then the grocery store only buys in products that serves the community that the grocery store are built in. And once your household products are in the grocery store, then the grocery store have an obligation to make sure that you get your communications in your house, that governmental officers send your household communications, that your household have got its means of finances. So the grocery store can then therefore locate and then therefore send your food grocery parcels that me and Ribea Elise were employed at Nibblebits, at Oostenburg, lots of hard in the aan. And when the communication line calls you and contacts you, like it contacted our family on our journey, then the communication line are a legislative acknowledgement that the legislative court of law have to be responsible in it. That I say, New Zealand government, you'll have to learn to be responsible in the computerized office that your country are built on. In Ribea Elise's New Zealand house, y'all are playing too much sensitive games by television. It means that y'all are not responsible in the communication line. It means that y'all can look around the world to explain anyone in any criminal communication that you want to. But y'all have to learn to adhere to legislation. And when the government commit a criminal offense, then a criminal offense remains a criminal offense. Then the governmental office, the governmental leaders have got to learn to act in accordance to their constitutional right. Their right to be acknowledged in their employment journey, but their right to also be responsible in all that the employment journey introduced to them. Their right to adhere to the office business responsibility. And when it's not so difficult for us to educate it on our journeys communications, then it cannot be so difficult for a governmental office to uphold their constitutional right, to implement fair, right processes that are in all acknowledgement. They stipulated the right constitutional means it's stipulated. It's under legislation according to legislative responsibility, according to all that they learn that the earth find themselves have been challenged in and have been the right to be acknowledged in. When people have a right to be acknowledged and they sit in Africa and they are being challenged in a communication, then it's a constitutional criminal offense. When an African country today finds themselves in poverty, while me, Queen Ribea Elise in the Johannesburg room have walked a complete journeys communication that are the office business communication, a Queen Mommy Universe communication that have introduced me in so much offices that I say to businesses, when you do not get my language on my cell phone media page, refer to my LinkedIn page, find out who I am, do a reference check on what I'm educating, call the offices that I've been employed at. Aren't that a director's responsibility? When they hear that a person like me mentioned so much on the cell phone media page, and when they learn that the earth has got so much wars, so much oppressions, so much poverties, that anyone could have done their work right in it, that we all want to look educated when we are dressed in our office attire. But it ain't yet only our office attire me, Queen Ribea Elise, educate on my Vogue fashion pages. It ain't yet the office attire that introduces us on our journeys. It is how we present and represent and introduce and acknowledge the right to acknowledge someone else. The right for us to then therefore also be acknowledged. And then, under the constitutional right, then the Bureau of Standard, that Queen Mom Universe Anna George Philander, Queen Mom Universe, your honor in the birth womb. The Bible writes Queen Anna, the prophet, mama of wisdom, that are not only wisdom and insight, that are not only the journey that were born in South Africa. The Bible writes the Anna, the prophetical journey that my mama have walked. That are women of honor and pride. That are Prada fashion, Anna Prada. Anna with pride, the Bible writes, with honor, with wisdom, with intelligence. We are educated in the communication line. And it's Queen Mom Universe, Anna George Philander. My Queen Mom Universe, Anna George Philander, always used to wear her blazers with all the different colors to introduce the honor of pride that we are being introduced on our journeys. The womb of pride and of honor, that we can be proud of all that we built in our years, of all that we introduced, that we can be excited to celebrate along in the journey, in how the journey educates in its years. That there's no way for processes to be fighting one another in a computerized communication line. Queen Mom Universe and George Philander would educate, that educates so thoroughly that my Queen and George Philander couldn't read and write. But when my mama had to sign a document in the signature, in all acknowledgement, in all legislative responsibility, in all that legislation have to adhere to, then my mama writes her name so slowly, Anna. In all that we have to respond to. The surname Philander, that are the Papa family line's journey, that are the Humbertans that have traveled through Africa, and they are also not only African international journeys, and their families are also in America. Then my mama signed it for me so clearly on a document. So clearly, then my mama showed me, come, and then my mama said, come and sit here, and I'm in secondary school. Then my mama was employed at Paarl Hospital. Then my mama said, now I have to kindly sign this document. Kindly look at how I signed this document. And then my mama take the pencil so thoroughly. In America writes it in the films, and when my Queen Mom George Philander take the pencil, and Queen George Philander begins to write the acknowledgement signature. The acknowledgement journey's responsibility. And my mama say, only publish the book, Anna. When y'all are all educated, my child, then only publish for me the book, Anna. The legislative responsibility, legislative acknowledgement that we have when the journeys communications have been introduced to us, to acknowledge it in all right from wrong that we have been introduced to, in all acknowledgement. In all that the Bureau of Standards stands for when we were introduced to it in our educational journeys. In all that we have to uphold our right hands on. Then we're going to conclude with the next part of the video, the constitutional right, the Bureau of Standard, the legislative response that we have to respond at. That are the second part of our video that we record for this week. HR 2025-2026 Business Restructuring with me, Ribea Elise. Legislative acknowledgement. With our legislative acknowledgement under the Constitutional Act, right? The Act to acknowledge the Departmental Office Program. The Departmental Office Program we've mentioned in the previous video. The acknowledgement right that businesses have to acknowledge the departmental office that holds business under the same office communication line, that are the office telephone line. And when our departmental office constitutional right are to then acknowledge, then in acknowledgement we refer to the word having to contact and to be responsible in the communication office that introduces you in a business communication next to another business communication. And when the constitutional right, that are the constitutional act, that are the act to acknowledge, holds the legislative responsibility, then it holds the responsibility to legislatively be introduced to other businesses. The responsibility to legislatively, therefore, introduce your business also then, therefore, to other in businesses. The legislative court of law educates, then, therefore, your business are introduced to other businesses. And when your departmental structure are educated in your business office, and your departmental structure forms part of all your different introductions in the business office, then so the business office introduce the business to other businesses. When your departmental structure becomes so clear and direct in acknowledgement, then your departmental structure acknowledges people that forms part under the same director office that your business forms part of and that your business are acknowledged on. And when your departmental structure are the employees on a direct departmental employment job description line, then the employees forms part of the business introduction. And so are the departmental structure that acknowledges you to the legislative acknowledgement that you have to acknowledge other businesses. And then, therefore, under the constitutional right, your business then therefore have a right to contact businesses that forms part of the same constitutional act, that are the act to respond, to make contact with businesses that are the same business contact line, the same business telephone line, the same business communication line that your business are acknowledged on and are accredited on. And then your accreditation right becomes therefore your departmental structure. Your departmental structure are your accreditational right. The accreditational right are businesses that are accredited under the same business office. The departmental structure are departments that forms part of the same department. And then therefore under the constitutional right, your business then have a right, have a responsibility to then therefore make contact with businesses that are the same business contact line, communication line, telephone line, computerized line, software office program line, journey communications line, the office business color communications line, school color educational communication line. And then under the constitutional right, the Constitutional Act are then stipulating the right for your business to be represented, the right for your business to represent itself in its educational journey, the right for your business to be acknowledged, the right for your business to acknowledge other businesses in the same communication line that holds business with your business, the right for your business to adhere to legislation, The right for legislation to be acknowledged in your business office communication line. And then the constitutional right becomes clear and it becomes direct. And when the constitutional right becomes so clear and direct, then the constitutional right directs us in our direction that businesses have to act in a responsible, in a legislative acknowledgement right. And when our businesses act in a legislative acknowledgement right, then the Constitution Act are then that your business are then responsible in its constitution, in its law to be responsible, in its legislative right to be responsible, in its legislative right to then therefore be acknowledged. In its legislative right to then therefore receive all its green ticks, all its acknowledgement responsibility rights that we educate in the previous week's video, all the green ticks, the health and safety right, the right to be therefore acknowledged being a business under the office business communication line. And that's this part of the video that we now want to focus on. Legislation, right? Under the acknowledgement, the right for business officers to acknowledge the communication line that they hold business on. And with this part of the video, I want us to be introduced to the statutory law. I want us to be introduced to the statutory law under the 1+1 office with the constitutional right that businesses have to adhere to the Constitution, to adhere to legislation, the constitutional act that are legislative responsibility. Under the statutory law that are under the 1+1 office with the constitutional law, the law that then introduces your business to another business, the legislative acknowledgement that the legislative court of law have in all that we are introduced to on our educational career journeys, that then therefore becomes the statutory right, the right to then therefore be introduced. Being a business in the international world that are holding office under the software communication line that are the office business communication line. Once your business are introduced, like me, Ribea Elise's business on my cell phone media pages, and once your business have walked such a clear journey like I have walked on my human resource introductional journey, that I say to all business directors, when you don't understand the language that I'm educating on, then kindly refer to my LinkedIn page to find out why it is important for your business to make contact with my business. Then it becomes the statutory right, the right for your business to then therefore make contact with a business that forms part of the same constitutional right that your business holds a departmental office on. A departmental office then has become the accreditation office for your business. And when your business are part of me, Ribea Elise's departmental office communication lines, I've mentioned in the previous video last week, then your business don't have to wait for my business to be accredited under the communication line, for your business to then therefore make contact with my business. But under the constitutional right Your business then were introduced to my business, when your business then learned about my business in the communication line that your business are introduced to my Evoke business ad. Whether it's on a cell phone media page introduction, how the computerized office then decide to introduce us becomes then the state that the communication line are then introducing in. A state then becomes a communication line that are then acknowledging under the departmental state, under the director management departmental state, under the management departmental state, under the supervisory departmental state. Then your business then forms part of the same departmental office communication line that my business forms part of. And once your business then forms part of the same departmental communication line, then it's your business's statutory right to then make contact with my Evoke business in all that your business have learned about my Evoke business and its journeys communications. The statutory law are then the law that introduces, the law that directs in acknowledgement that we educate under the constitutional law, under the constitutional right to contact other businesses. And when your law are educated under the constitutional right to make contact with other businesses, when you learn about the communication line, then your law therefore have a right to act in accordance to the Constitution. And when your law acts under the Constitution, then your law they react in accordance to its statutory right that becomes the building that your business have office at. That does not only becomes the building, but that for me, Ribea, under the statutory law, becomes the software office program. For someone else in the Chinese country that are the scientists behind the communication that sends the communication to us, it becomes the computerized communication for them in their business office. But for us, it's a statutory acknowledgement. It's an acknowledgement that we have been introduced to the business communication line. An acknowledgement that me, Ribea Elise's business communication line, have been educating all over my cell phone media pages. I've been educating on LinkedIn page. I've been educating on Instagram. I've been educating on Facebook. I've been educating on my website. I've been educating on YouTube. I've been educating my business communication line on Twitter. I've acknowledged all social media platform acknowledgement to introduce my business in all the entertainment industry acknowledgement, in all that we have to acknowledge at. In all that Tokyo, Japan called my sis Aquin Anshune to Tokyo, Japan, under her right to be acknowledged in the council office in England, under the Entertainment Act. That our family have talked a complete journeys communications and in all that they were building. And then she had a right to travel based on the circumstances on earth. And then the earth had so much aggressions under the Entertainment Act that she decided to resign from the entertainment manager role at the council office in England, based on all that were implemented that were endangering her or her household. And then she had a legislative responsibility to resign from the employment and to say no thank you, under the accreditation acknowledgement that she was accredited under her Legislative Court of Law Studies that she studied at Stellenbosch University. Then she had a right to acknowledge herself under the communication line. And to then, therefore, the Legislative Court of Law would say, then therefore decide to then hold on to the communication line acknowledgement or decide to then resign based on the circumstances that were sometimes based on the poverty circumstances on earth, based on the aggressions on earth, that she could not have held unto the same employment acknowledgement responsibility. That no matter how an entertainment office role seems to our house in its journey's communication line under the office business, then it's our legislative right, our right to react responsible under all that we learned in our journey's communications, and our right to decide on career choices that are fair in accordance to where we find ourselves at in our journey's communications under the office business. And when the statutory law stipulates the direct requirement and responsibility under the office business that businesses have to uphold their legislative right, then it's a clear, direct communication office that holds the communication line in one acknowledgement under the legislative responsibility. The statutory law holds the communication line in one office acknowledgement under the legislative responsibility that countries have to be responsible in the business office communication that are the office business communication that all countries are built on. And there are not yet only a building communication like we've mentioned, but there are complete womb acknowledgement. There are how we are born on earth, how we are born in acknowledgement to all that were introduced on earth. Genesis 1 verse 7, we again refer to the communications by the television, star communications, the communications under the seas, in acknowledgement to all the communications that were built on earth, the statutory law. Genesis 1, the statutory law, the legislative responsibility, the Constitutional Act. The law that are set, determined communication, the office business communication line that are built in acknowledgement to all that were built. The statutory acknowledgement, the stipulated acknowledgement, the acknowledgement that cannot change or that does not divert off of its processes. Its processes are therefore then to introduce us to all that the communication line are acknowledged on. And when it becomes a grocery store's responsibility to ensure that me, Ribea Elise's house in New Zealand, have groceries on a monthly basis in my cupboard in accordance to all that they manufacture, and the computerized scientific communication office in accordance to all that they import that acknowledges my name on their computerized database, that acknowledges my house address in the country, then it's a statutory requirement for them to then be under the Constitutional Act responsible and to adhere to legislation and to make means of implementing processes that are responsible, that are fair, so that my house gets all its groceries that are being manufactured in the community, in the near vicinity that your house's grocery store are locating your household in. And while the house's grocery store at such a direct communication line, and it introduces and it contacts us to the grocery store, and it's a computerized office, and it's not meant to be manipulated, and it introduces so thoroughly, then it's under the Fair Legislative Responsibility Act that countries have, that the world cannot be in so much poverty when the world are built under such clear communication offices. And then countries have a right to react responsible and to adhere to legislation. We're going to educate further on the statutory law based on the poverty circumstances on earth, based on the 50% of countries that are provided 100% under the computerized communication office that are built in all countries. And countries that therefore find themselves in so much poverty that does not yet have means of locating all their communications. While most communications on earth today are directed through a computerized communication, where all of us today have a cell phone, mobile phone, where the computerized communication directs and makes us be in contact with another on cell phone media pages. Where our communications in our households are directed to us through the computerized office. Then we're going to educate further under the statutory requirement for countries that are in poverty to then legislatively be provided for under the Health and Safety Act. That we educate further on in our mindset control over attitude. Under the mental state that countries find themselves at. And while our season of educating under the statutory law have now introduced us to the statutory requirement for governmental officers to adhere to legislation, then we constitutionally introduces the educational journey that have been introduced to us under the Office Business Communication. And that are the communication offers that are the clear, direct, in acknowledgement offers that becomes the office that introduces. The statutory law, the Statue of Liberty, the office that introduces. Under the office business. And while me, Queen Ribea Elise, are walking a journey that I have been introduced in my journey's communication line. And while I'm the office business computerized alien in the Chinese governmental country, in American television, while the Chinese scientists have to monitor American television employees. And while me, Queen Ribea Elise, are the Statue of Liberty, the communication office that introduces the office business communication. And while me, Queen Ribea, were born in South Africa on the communication line, while the communication line have walked a clear introduction journey, and while the families arrived safely in South Africa under it. And while me, Queen Ribea, on my way to Paris, France, with my sis Queen Antoinette, to the Statue of Liberty communication line that we have been introduced to, while my sis Queen Antoinette are now 20 years in England under the communication line. And while we were on Twickenham Stadium in London City with the photos on all our Facebook pages to show the international world of office that we are kindly walking to the Statue of Liberty, the statue under the acknowledgement right, the right for officers to be introduced to one another. And while I arrived in England in the year 2013, 2014, and while I arrived in England again in December 2016, and while my sister Queen Antoinette said to me over the telephone that we are kindly going on a vacation through Europe when I'm on my next vacation, and while the communication under the constitutional right are introducing, under the Constitutional Act are introducing, then kindly acknowledged the office business introduction with me, Ribea Elise, with Queen Mum Universe and a George Philander Room, School of Color, Afrikaans Duitse Translation Journeys. The right to be acknowledged. The right to therefore acknowledge. The right to adhere to legislation. The right for legislation to therefore implement fair processes that are in acknowledgement towards introduction offers. And we therefore want to hold on and conclude with the right to adhere to our legislative responsibility under the office business. The right, we cannot emphasize enough on it. The right to adhere to its legislative responsibility under the constitutional office, under the statutory law, the law that reacts in accordance to legislation, the law that does not only stipulate and that does not only write like the Bible would say. It was not only the writing on the wall, the Bible say. The statutory law are not only in accordance to the writing in the legislative court of law, but it's the law that stipulates, that reacts in accordance to legislation. And we then therefore do not want to direct us anywhere else under the constitutional right and under the right to be acknowledged under the statutory right. Statutory might on our ears sounds like only stipulated right, but it's an acknowledgement right under the legislative right, the right to acknowledge and the right to then therefore be acknowledged under the office business. With me, Ribea Elise. That's where we're concluding with this video. Any other educations we will then therefore acknowledge under our Chinese education that are under the constitutional law, under the statutory law, under departmental acknowledgement, under the accredited acknowledgement. Departmental structure under the office business communication line structure, the communication line that acknowledges businesses to one another, the responsible right for businesses to therefore contact one another and to be responsible in acknowledging the computerized offers that are the office business. That's it with me, Queen Ribea Elise.